Welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people here. I think there's a well-known saying that the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. So this really is one of the critical areas in any education system for development. DFID is very proud to be involved with Young Lives. It's really exciting because it looks at children in their entirety, and it looks at the same children over a longitudinal period. So it's really rich. This piece of research is no exception. It's really, really exciting. So I think we'll all enjoy this. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. Sudipa, my colleague, and I are delighted to share the findings of this paper. We were very keen to examine what is it that actually makes children do better in terms of teaching quality. Just to give you a little idea about Young Lives, we're a longitudinal study, 4-country study: Peru, Ethiopia, Vietnam, and India. In India, we are in Andhra Pradesh, our sample. There are 3 strands to our research. So we do quantitative research, qualitative research, and most importantly, we have a policy wing. So we are trying to make sure that our findings actually are the kind that will influence policy and practice. What we have is in each country, we're following 3,000 children, 2,000 children who were born in 2001 and 2, and 1,000 children who were born in 94, 95. We have a pro-poor sample, and you can see how the panel is running. So in the last round in 2009-10, the older cohorts were 15 and the younger cohorts were 8. Though we had a lot of household level data, we have qualitative interviews, we had not really examined schools and the schools in which children were studying. So we did a sub-study and looking at schooling experiences of children. This was conducted in 2010-11. So this is most of the data that is being shared in the report today comes from the school-based study. Though our study gives you many more aspects of children, today this paper is really on teaching quality. So yes, India has, of course, made great strides in terms of access to education. But if we look at quality and retention, it's still a big challenge, particularly at the upper primary level and the secondary level. We are grappling with 0.5 million teachers who are unqualified in the system. There are lots of things that are happening to meet this teacher shortage. But ultimately, I think we need to look at the quality of teacher preparation because that is key. We have this new phenomena of low-fee charging private schools which have been mushrooming across the country. This is not just in urban areas, but also in the rural landscape. There is this incremental change of children moving to private schools. Undoubtedly, the larger government schools still have 83% of the share, according to DICE 2010-11. Very interestingly, we found that while in 2002, 23.2%, the last bars, were in private schools, this increased to 44% in 2009. So in 2009, 44% of our 8-year-olds were in private schools. And look at the numbers in terms of male-female. You can see, whereas only a quarter of the boys were in private schools, this had doubled to half the boys were in private schools. So in 2002, almost equal numbers of boys and girls were in private schools, a quarter. But the disparity is now increasing. It moved to 37%, so there is a bigger gap between boys and girls. Other castes, you've got 70% in private schools. Backward classes, 44%, and it decreases, and scheduled tribes, it's just 21%. Who are going into private schools becoming very obvious. And here you can see by wealth quartiles. The quartile 1 is our poorest quartile, and the light pink are the children in private schools, while 86% of the least poor, so out of our sample, the least poor, 86% are in actually private schools, and in government schools, you've got 83% of the poorest. Look at the choices parents are making. 52% of those who were choosing public schools gave the reason of the school being near the home. But those who were sending to private schools, 62% of them was saying we're sending our children to this school because it's a good quality school. So this paper actually therefore decided to do a factor analysis of teaching quality and its impact on learning outcomes of children both in public and private schools through the school survey. This paper is only using data from the younger cohort. In terms of teacher characteristics, what do we find? You found 17% of government school teachers with no teacher qualifications, whereas it was much higher in the private schools, 43% without teaching qualifications, like D.Ed, B.Ed, and M.Ed. So definitely public school teachers are better qualified, yes? They have, and if you look at the last column of salaries, you find the mean salary in government schools are 12,321. And in private schools, this is a third. Yes, it's only 3,331. We looked at teacher content, pedagogical content knowledge of analyzing children's errors in mathematics. It was very interesting to see that public school teachers scored higher than the private school teachers. So they knew more than the private school teachers. But look at the distribution of the scores in mathematics. The dark line is the public school and the private school is in dotted line. And you can see that, there is definitely a higher mathematics score and the distribution is also much higher. There is definitely children had higher achievement scores in private schools. Also, it's very interesting to see school characteristics. Government schools, 44% had less than 60 children. Yeah? Whereas only, less than one school actually is coming to 0.9, but this is really one school in our sample, had less than 60 children in private schools. So private schools are larger. And you can see 250 and above, the last row, 50% of the private schools had 250 and more children, whereas only 5% of the government schools in our sample had 250 children. Look at the number of teachers. So 2 teachers for children less than 60, and this is the PTR, that has even been prescribed by the right to education. But what does it lead to? It leads to multi-grade classrooms for sure. 32% of government schools had multi-grade classrooms, vis-a-vis only 2% in private schools. So in private schools, every grade has one teacher. So look what parents are saying. They're saying in government schools, teaching is below par. Classes are not held regularly, and teaching is haphazard. I would like to admit the girl in a better school, even if it costs us another 5,000 loan. We're working for their sake. We have no male children. This is a mother with only one child. Better we sell an acre of land and send her to a better school. That is my aim. On a scale, we ask them, tell us, do you believe your school is better than other schools in the community? Is your school the same as other schools, or is it worse than other schools? 50% of the teachers said, yes, our schools are better than other schools in the government schools. But this number was much larger in the private schools. 84% felt their schools were better. And what is significant is 10% in government school, the teacher said, our school is worse than other schools, whereas there were none in the private schools, of course. This is extremely significant because while 80% and more, 81%, almost 82% of the books in the private schools were completely corrected on a regular basis, only 40% were corrected in government schools. And we found 12% of the books, almost 13%, which hadn't been checked at all in the government schools. Supraja's mother's complaining. Nobody bothers in a government school whether a child has done homework or not. Whereas the private school teachers are scrupulously particular about these things. In private schools, they give us progress reports and they conduct tests regularly. We have to understand that there's a huge diversity. Schools are not all homogeneous, right? Just leave you to, read what the Deputy Inspector of Schools said and says, private schools are like pressure cookers. But then the teachers are there and they are teaching. And an urban education official says, private institutions are demanding huge amounts of tuition and neglecting quality of teaching and learning. This is a government education official. But says, in order to induce belief in the government schools, a multifaceted revolution has to come.
This is about the governance and management. So you can see in both the schools, absenteeism is there, 38% in public school and 29% in private school. But if you look at the teacher dismissal, there is no dismissal in public school, which shows that there is less accountability in public school. So standard characteristics like teachers' experience, their general education, their subject knowledge, these things do not have any influence on children's outcome. So it is ultimately what teacher does in the classroom that matters. How he or she behaves with the children, that matters, and also what he believes about his or her school, that matters.
If we want to look at quality education for children, we have to definitely start looking very closely at teacher preparation, particularly in context of how are teachers prepared with pedagogical content knowledge. I think that is what our focus needs to be now. How do we look at continuous professional development? How do we look at mentoring processes? How do we make sure induction is done for a new teacher to be mentored by a senior teacher? Where are the teacher educators today with this kind of knowledge? How much of experiential learning do teacher educators get as part of continuous professional development? We did not find any difference between learning outcomes of teachers who were BAs and MAs and BEds and MEds is something we really need to think about. What are we doing in terms of teacher preparation? Also, I think it's very important to look at governance aspects. Unless we have standards and benchmarks for teaching and learning, and then a robust appraisal system that actually ensures that teachers are doing their job, we are not going to be able to reach our EFA goals. Thank you very much. I just want to give you our website. That's on the screen. Please, we have lots of papers there. You're welcome to download them. Thank you very much for listening.
I'm going to be talking more from a practitioner point of view. There is a huge shortage of teachers, partly because teaching is not necessarily seen as a high-status profession, even among the low-cost private school sectors. Renu's and Sudeepa's research talks about that while government school teachers are better qualified, better trained, and seem to know more in content tests, they don't necessarily seem to be performing as well as the private school teachers in terms of student outcomes, partly because I think the government system perhaps disempowers much more than the private school system. Renu talked about in her paper the need for teaching standards. Maybe that's a great starting point. I'd like to sum up by saying that if we want to, and it's exactly what Renu was also saying, if we want to improve teaching and teaching as a profession, and if we want to ensure that teaching results in positive learning for children, we have to consider teacher training very rigorously. Rigorous teacher training doesn't mean more tests and exams. It just means that we train them in all the realities of what happens in schools and classrooms.
Unpacking of what constitutes quality in education needs far greater debate. I think your study underlines the oversimplification of equating quality with qualification. The fact that government schools cater to not just the poor but the poorest of our children, and they have dreams just as much as anybody else. Their parents want to see a better future for them. How to make government schools function better, I think, is the question that you've raised, and I'm not sure we have even the beginnings of an answer, because if we continue to almost design government schools for failure, they're going to be ghettos for those children whose parents can't afford even the small fees that low-income private schools provide.
I would just like to congratulate firstly the Young Lives for having come out with this report, which is in a certain sense a culmination of research for the past so many years since 2001, and gives, as Renu has been insistently saying from time to time, a wealth of information, a wealth of facts and data which is out there for anybody to use. For that reason, I congratulate Young Lives. Discrimination in school is something we need to take into consideration when we are looking at learning outcomes. When we are talking about why do parents send their kids to low fee charging schools, I think the medium of instruction in the government schools is a factor that needs to be considered very, very strongly. Going to an English medium school in India is the prestige issue. For that reason, at least, there is a huge premium placed on low fee private schools. Our society is so diverse that it's not merely the diversity of the classroom that we should note, but we should also look at the implications of those diversities. So when a child says, my teacher is not fair to me, there are ways and ways in which the fairness or the unfairness is played out. Authoritarian relationship of the teacher vis-a-vis both the parent and the child is well recognized in the schooling system in general, irrespective of whether it is the government or the private sector. I again would like to make one more caveat that the subject knowledge of the teacher would be as crucial as it would be necessary for them to know the pedagogy, because both of them have to be integrated. How does the teacher envision himself or herself as an arbiter of the fates of the child whose destiny he is actually holding in his hands? That is something that has not really entered the minds of the teacher. Again, the teacher educators here will vouch for it. And to get that in is probably the vision that we all would probably need to develop cumulatively, collectively, and if not consensually, at least the marking out the basics that we want.
Listening to the discussion, it does feel as if there is a lot of consensus around what some of the major issues are. I've heard many people refer to issues of inequality and social distance and how that plays out through both society but through the school system. I've heard a lot of things said about not wanting to blame teachers, but recognizing the real importance of the government system and what can be done to help facilitate better teaching and learning outcomes for children within that. And practical examples are clearly very important in that, of things that can be done to help maintain and develop that accountability.
I would like to once again thank all of you and all my colleagues and Paul for chairing the session and all of you for coming.